Ladies and gentlemen, let me hope you're doing well wherever you are. It's a beautiful morning here in Oklahoma City. And again, whether you are in South America, North America, Africa, Asia, let me hope you're enjoying your weekend, whether it's evening, morning, or night. And again, today I will be going over chapter 15 of my second book. And again, that is football wouldn't have had racism if it was not in the society. And again, this is just a continuation of chapter 14. Truth of the matter is, in that chapter, I started by saying, given that the real story is we are all different colors but one people, the truth of the matter is black players have suffered for many years, as I emphasized throughout the book, and they're still sweltering in the heat of injustice and oppression. And for this chapter, it's just a continuation. There wouldn't have been racism in football if it wasn't in a society. Also, there wouldn't have been racism in our societies if those who started it could have been educated that all people were equal regardless of the color of their skin. What's racism? Who started racism? Where did it originate from? Why is it still among us, and how can we get rid of it from our societies? Those are some of the questions I asked in the second paragraph. In my personal opinion, when it comes to topics pertaining to racism, it might be a little bit tricky given that a lot has happened since our planet faced a series of giants. These giants were none other than imperialism, colonialism, slavery, and neocolonialism. Even though we may be free from the above mentioned giants, we are still not free from one of the most contagious diseases of all time. You will realize that I've used the term racism in each and every chapter in this book. But there's probably some of you who are wondering, what's even racism? According to the American Psychological Association, racism is a form of prejudice that assumes that members of racial categories have distinctive characteristics and that these differences result in some racial groups being perceived as inferior to others. Racism generally includes negative emotional reaction to members of the group, acceptance of negative stereotypes, and racial discrimination against individuals. In some cases, it leads to violence. Can you imagine that? To some cases, it leads to violence. Given the fact that I've also used the term discrimination in every chapter, according to the American Psychological Association, it refers to the differential treatment of the members of different ethnic, religious, national, or other groups. Discrimination is usually the behavioral manifestation of prejudice and therefore involves negative, hostile, and injurious treatment of members of rejected groups. Racism is not always explicit. Remember that. Racism is not always explicit, readily visible, or conscious. It's often systemic and structural. These are two forms of discrimination that are pervasively and deeply embedded in laws, systems, written and unwritten policies, and entrenched practices and beliefs that produce, condone, and perpetuate widespread unfair treatment and oppression of people of color with adverse health consequences. Someone may also be wondering, who are people of color? To answer your question, it's simply a person who is not white. People of color is a term used to refer to African Americans, Africans, American Indians, Alaskan Natives, Asian Americans, Hispanics or Latinos, and Native Hawaiians or other Pacific Islanders. Being in America in the past 7 years, I've interacted with every ethnicity that's mentioned above. All these people are not different from anyone, to be honest. The only thing that's differentiates all of them is the color of their skins, practices, cultures, beliefs, and customs. Being around each and every one of them, I never felt inferior. I felt like I was significant and important just like any of them. Not forgetting Caucasians, the majority. In fact, I have interacted with more Caucasians than any of those minority ethnic backgrounds. In my personal opinions, racism was something that was pushed on the human race to make them confused among themselves and convince them that some races are superior to others, which was wrong and is unacceptable. The issue is deeply rooted in our societies, Having worked with all this group of people, I can assure you the issue is real. You might be wondering if I've faced racism or any sort of discrimination since I moved to America. As I mentioned in the book just the other day, I encountered bullying and discrimination while in Virginia for the 3 years I was there, some of which I didn't know was happening to me until I came to my realization that it was actually happening. In fact, to me, racism and bullying are the same thing, given that I experienced both while in Virginia. Just like these black players who have been bullied and humiliated in Europe, I've also faced the same treatment while working in a certain organization, which I'm not going to mention due to the sincere respect and love I have for it. I can't blame the organization. I can only blame few individuals who have allowed bullying, racism, and other forms of other issues to happen. I frankly understand when it comes to unfair treatment directed at anyone, there are those who try their best to show some concern, compassion, and empathy. The problem is that they usually do that while afraid of being targeted by the majority who carry out all sorts of bigotry. I truly acknowledge what they endure to help those who experience injustice. They're definitely heroes. And again, this is my favorite quote here by Desmond Tutu. If you're neutral in a situation of injustices, you have chosen the side of oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you're neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. Those of you out there who choose the side of oppressor, I pity you. Many victims of bullying and racism are depending on you to make a difference. These black players are no exception. Your voices can change their lives completely. I never thought that one day I would be a writer. Today I write about bullying and racism because they are prevalent in our societies. The truth of the matter is, if we get rid of racism in our societies, I strongly believe we will kick it out from other places, and football is not an exemption. How can we kick it out of our societies? It's simple and clear. If you see something, say something. The problem is that nowadays so many issues are being downplayed. Someone can experience total discrimination, but people around him will pretend like nothing ever happened. This is the reality in its current society we are living in. We are living in a very complicated world. Through my African eyes, I've seen these kind of things happen, and they're still happening as I write this book. I've seen good people be part of hooliganism, because they were afraid of being targeted. They had no choice but to give in. It's sad. And again, I still repeat, it's sad. This is why we will never go past these issues. They will continue to harass, bully, and intimidate us. We need to have a warrior mindset. There's no way we can allow racism to bring us down. We all need to agree that the problem of racism is in our societies, and then find ways to tackle it instead of pretending that there's no issue. Another problem is that a lot of people nowadays will hear the truth, see the truth, but still believe in lies, which clearly shows that many people today are feeding on lies to trivialize the issue of racism. By minimizing or making it less important, it makes them feel better or avoid being confronted. After agreeing that these issues in our societies, other questions we should be asking among ourselves are: how can a more equitable society be achieved? And what's making racism such a complicated problem to solve? Those are some of the questions you can ask yourself, because the issue has been prevalent in our societies for many years. As said earlier, if you happen to say something, you must say something. The best way to deal with this issue is hitting it on the head. There's no need to keep downplaying it when it's here with us. There will never be victory without a battle. The battle starts now. Our societies are full of bigotry. There's not only racism, but also corruption, killings, bullying, sexism, human trafficking, Islamophobia, etc. All these things are being done by people, not animals. Animals are even more peaceful than humans nowadays. People are becoming dangerous. Maybe these are the end times that were highlighted in the book of Revelation. The racist funds that have tormented black footballers get false information about other races in these societies we live in. They get them from their neighbors, friends, relatives, bars, schools, and even churches. Are you surprised when I mention churches? The world is full of churches that have continued to spread false teachings, and topics of racism are no exemption. You can just wake up one day and you find your neighbor just opened a place of worship. If you're smart enough, you want to know what drove him to do that, especially if you never saw him go to church before. If it's the Holy Spirit of God that led him to do that, it's understandable. But if he was driven by bad motives, you will want to know more. And don't be surprised if you become his assistant pastor if you're not smart enough. The fact that curiosity killed the cat. Let's leave places of worship for now. It will be another book on its own sooner than later. Let's continue to focus on the real issue, which is racism in our societies. Given that our societies are multiracial, especially in Europe, North America, and South Africa, we need to educate each other about ourselves. We should respect each other. Respect for people is needed regardless of the color of our skin. We should encourage other people to have their say, demonstrate empathy for their point of view, and try to understand things from their perspective. Respect is usually earned, not given. It's no doubt highly needed in our societies. I don't know who came up with the belief of white supremacy. You might be wondering as well. It's perhaps the reason why we still have racism in our societies. This belief that white people constitute a superior race and should therefore dominate society is detrimental for other minority ethnic backgrounds. In spite of the fact that it favors the maintenance and defense of any power and privilege held by white people, black people and other people of color are the ones who have suffered the most, and they're still not free. In America, white supremacy has been demonstrated since the first enslaved African arrived on the shores of Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. It continues to have a lasting impact on the country. Racial division has defined America. Racism continues to dominate American society like a virus. In fact, it's causing an impact in every aspect of people's lives. People are even afraid of speaking their minds. They are afraid that people will judge them based on what they say. For instance, if a white person uses the N word, things usually go loose. Why can black people use the N word, but white people can't? I'm just flabbergasted as you are. Besides African American in America, I've encountered Africans in the past who use the term nigger. It's funny when Africans use it, it sounds offensive and unrealistic. To me, when used by African, the way it comes out from their mouth, it's like they're being forced to say it. It's simple and clear. It doesn't fit them the way it just doesn't fit them. As when I said it, it doesn't even fit me. So it shouldn't be used by any of them. In my personal opinion, or in my opinion, the term shouldn't be used by anyone regardless of race if it will cause chaos. If the term is offensive when used by white people, why is it still being used among black people? I understand the N word originates from the Latin word for black nigger. It was used as a derogatory term by the early 1800s to perpetuate the black stereotype. It was used to differentiate between the black people and white people. It created a hierarchy where blacks were at the bottom while whites were at the top. Through the consistent misrepresentation of black people in the media, black people have been misunderstood by the rest of American society. American society is rooted in a system where black people are at disadvantage since they are often seen as less individuals. Black people still feel the effects of slavery and segregation through police brutality and the inner workings of the criminal justice system. Anti-black prejudice is prominent throughout American society, and the N-word is a representation of these prejudices or this prejudice that still exists. This is sad. It's really sad. It's not only sad, but also a stumble in growth for the healing process. Some time ago, I was working with a Native American female. We were both performing waist measurement on some few individuals. Given that I'm a man, I was responsible for male counterparts, while she was responsible for female counterparts. While going through the list with all the names of people who had signed for body composition assessment, BCA, or waist measurement, I noticed her hesitance to pronounce a certain name. I looked at the list and saw the name she was having some difficult to pronounce. The name was Negron. The last name that belonged to a certain lady. The good thing was that I had two African Americans nearby. Given that it was a last name, one of the African Americans advised her to go by the first name because she wasn't comfortable to go by the last name. Out of curiosity, even though I knew what was happening or I knew the context of conversation, I asked him, why? He looked at me and said, so that it doesn't cause issues. Even though I was aware of the context of our conversation, I asked this Native American female to get the second African American points of view. She was just sitting few feet away from us, actually. I asked her why, while pointing to the name, why is it that my fellow colleague here is having some difficulty to say this word? She looked at me and said, given that the term is closer to Negro, it sounds offensive and demeaning. I further asked, and why is it that the N word is being used among African Americans, but when used by white people, it causes an eruption? I need to get her perspective. She exactly explained the same thing I said earlier. The term itself is a representation of prejudice. The main reason why I wanted my colleague to get African Americans' perspective on the last name was I wanted her to learn something from it, because there's no need to be living in fear. It's important to have this type of conversation in order to grow and heal. And I still repeat that it's good to have this type of conversation in order to grow and heal. I feel the pain that black people have had to endure in America, but there's some things that are still holding us back. The use of the term N-word is definitely one of them. We need to stop using it in order to set good example in our societies. On the other hand, white people should also refrain from using the term. Besides using the N-word, white people also need to stop the ignorance. I've seen some in the past that pretended to be innocent when truly discrimination, bigotry, and unfair treatment were being carried out. No one is responsible for the past. We are all responsible for the present as well as the future we are creating for ourselves and future generation. White people also need to lead the way in calling out police brutality, Karen-like behaviors, discrimination at workplaces, and other forms of mistreatment. By doing all this, they will shape a way for a modest society for all people, the society that everyone will be proud of. The truth of the matter is that we can never erase the history of this beautiful country. Most of it is based on slavery, segregation, discrimination, and violence. Even though slavery and segregation ended, the effects of it still prevails today through police brutality, white privilege, violence among men and women of color. Some of these issues we have no control over because the majority of them are just the new phases of what happened before any of us was even born. The only thing we can do is to help each other heal and understand that the past is gone. We can never change what happened before us, but we can lead the way by doing small things step by step to create a better future for our next generation. All these examples that I mentioned above should not only be practiced by American society but also European societies where racism is more prevalent. Racism is not something that will end overnight. It will take years of hard work and perseverance. A luta continua, Victoria asserta. Struggles continue, or struggle continues, victory is certain. And again, that is chapter 15 of my second book. And again, you can see it's mainly on racism being in our societies, even though it extends to other areas like football, hospitals, organizations, schools. Is is still in our societies. And again, all these schools, all these other places we work at or we work in, it's societies, and we live in those societies. So we need to do better by calling it out, doing something. And you so clearly, I said, if you see something, you must say something, because we are still far behind by the issue of racism, and we cannot only do our best to make sure we kick it out from our societies, but making sure we condemn this type of behaviors, because we are all human beings. And you saw that in chapter 13. It ends with us. We are all different colors, but one people. In chapter that was in chapter 12. It ends with us, and in chapter 13, we're different colors but one people. And again, we can only do our best step by step. It's not going to end overnight. We have to do something, and again, being ahead of it and condemning the behaviors around us, calling out current like behaviors, police brutality, and also men and women of color refraining from using the term N-word. You saw when I said it, it didn't even fit me as an African. And also, Africans need to stop doing that, because I've seen some in the past who did that, and it was actually offensive, and it didn't fit them, as I said in the book. So we're going to hell for sure. We're going to hell, and it's good to talk about this type of issues without being offended. I know when it comes to the issue of discrimination and the topic of racism, it's one of those that leads to tension, grudges, resentment, and sometimes even fights. And again, let's do better. And again, you saw I finished by saying, a luta continua, victoria asserta, or struggle continues, victory is certain. And again, I'm going to see in the next session, which is going to be my sixth episode. And again, I'm going to surprise you on the topic. Thank you guys, and as always, I love you so much. I love you.